Previously, Fang Yuan returned 500 years into the past and began his ruthless second life. Now a hidden inheritance, a mysterious liquor worm, and the truth buried beneath Gu Yue clan history are about to change his path forever. Let us continue with episode 2 of Reverend Insanity. More than 300 years ago, within the Gu Yue clan there once appeared an unparalleled genius. At a very young age he had already cultivated to the level of a rank 5 Gu master, and his fame spread across all of Qing Mao Mountain. He was the 4th generation clan leader of the Gu Yue clan, a legendary figure. According to the clan's own legend, he once battled a notorious demonic cultivator known as Flower Wine Monk. Both were rank 5 Gu masters, and a battle that shook heaven and earth erupted. In the end, the 4th generation clan leader defeated Flower Wine Monk. The demonic cultivator knelt down and begged for mercy, but at that very moment he launched a treacherous sneak attack. The clan leader flew into a rage, killed Flower Wine Monk on the spot, but he himself was gravely injured and not long afterward he passed away. This tragic story had been passed down for generations. But Fang Yuan did not completely believe it because within that story there was a very large flaw in his previous life. About a month after he left the academy, a Gu master in the village suffered heartbreak and drank himself into a stupor outside the village. The scent of alcohol spread and attracted a liquor worm. That Gu master chased after it, and inside a hidden cave discovered the remains of Flower Wine Monk. Not only that, he also discovered his inheritance. The discovery shocked the entire village. The Gu master who discovered it became famous overnight. His strength increased greatly, and even the woman who had once abandoned him returned to pursue him again. But Fang Yuan had always felt something about this story was wrong. If it were him, after discovering such a massive inheritance, he would absolutely keep it secret. He would never report it to the clan because human beings are greedy. So why did that Gu master hand the inheritance over to the clan? That alone was extremely suspicious. But right now those mysteries were not important. The most important thing was still to find the inheritance. If he found it, all of Fang Yuan's problems would be solved. Primeval stones, resources, Gu worms, everything. But if he failed, his cultivation speed would slow greatly, and he would fall far behind the geniuses of his generation. At this moment he only had 2 primeval stones left. This was his last chance. That night a crescent moon hung in the sky. After 3 days of heavy rain, the mountain air had become incredibly pure, and scents could travel very far. This was the perfect condition to lure out the liquor worm. Fang Yuan stepped into the bamboo forest. This was the last place he had not searched. He opened the jar of green bamboo wine, and a rich scent of alcohol immediately spread into the air. This was the finest wine in the mountain village. Fang Yuan tilted the jar and poured wine onto a rock. He waited, nothing happened. He moved to another spot, poured wine again and waited again. Over and over, until finally only a small amount of wine remained. Fang Yuan flipped the jar upside down and poured everything out. The wine seeped into the grass. He stood still waiting. But everything around him remained silent. No liquor worm, no signs at all. His final hope had vanished. Fang Yuan sighed, perhaps it was time to stop. People of the demonic path like taking risks, but they did not gamble blindly. He knew when to stop. Fang Yuan turned around, preparing to leave. Just then a gust of wind blew past. The dark clouds parted and moonlight spilled over the bamboo forest. The scenery suddenly became mystical. Night crickets began chirping loudly. Glowing long-ring crickets shone bright red, jumping throughout the bamboo forest. Under the moonlight, the green-eyed bamboo glowed with jade-colored light. The scene looked like a fairyland. Fang Yuan subconsciously stopped and turned back for one last glance. The patch of grass where he had poured wine was still empty. He smiled bitterly. But just then his eyes suddenly froze. On a nearby bamboo stalk under the moonlight there was a tiny object, white like jade, clinging to the bamboo like a small pearl. Fang Yuan's pupils instantly widened and his heart pounded. It was the liquor worm. The small creature clung to the bamboo stalk. Its body resembled a silkworm, white as jade, plump and adorably round. But it was not something to underestimate. This was an extremely valuable Gu worm. Even though it was only rank 1, its value exceeded many rank 2 Gu worms because its ability could refine primeval essence. If used as a vital Gu, its effectiveness far surpassed Moonlight Gu. At that moment the liquor worm was about 50 or 60 steps away, but Fang Yuan did not move forward. Instead he stepped backward because he understood something clearly. With his current strength, trying to catch the liquor worm directly was almost impossible. Its flying speed was too fast. If startled even slightly, it would vanish into the forest. The only way was to wait until it became drunk. Fang Yuan slowly stepped back, quietly and carefully without making a single sound, until he was more than 200 steps away. Only then did the liquor worm relax its guard. It jumped and its body curled into a small ball like a white rice dumpling. It flew down and landed on the spilled green bamboo wine. The intoxicating scent was irresistible. It immediately burrowed into a wildflower, leaving only its fat little tail sticking out, and began drinking wildly. Only then did Fang Yuan begin approaching step by step. At first the liquor worm's tail was still, but gradually it began swaying, then swinging happily. Clearly it was drunk. Seeing this, Fang Yuan almost laughed, but he remained patient because he did not only want to catch the liquor worm. He also wanted it to lead the way. Soon the liquor worm crawled out of the flower, its body noticeably fatter and its head wobbling like a drunkard. It floated into the air about half a meter above the ground and slowly flew deeper into the bamboo forest. Fang Yuan immediately chased after it. Even drunk, the liquor worm still moved extremely fast. Fang Yuan had to run at full speed just to keep up. He dashed through the bamboo forest, across grass, over wildflowers. The glowing long ring crickets scattered like a red mist. A small stream appeared ahead, but Fang Yuan did not stop. He splashed straight through, moonlight shattering into silver ripples as he continued chasing. Finally, the liquor worm flew toward a large rock beside a cliff. A narrow crack ran through the stone and the worm slipped inside. Fang Yuan stopped, breathing heavily, his body soaked with sweat. He looked around. This place was a shallow riverbank covered with pebbles where the stream flowed gently. On the cliff ahead, a small waterfall poured down, and water flowed across the rock, forming a hidden opening. The liquor worm had flown inside. Fang Yuan's eyes lit up. He took a deep breath and rushed straight into the waterfall. The freezing water crashed down on him with immense pressure, but he kept moving forward. Inside the rock crevice, the passage became narrower and narrower until he had to turn sideways to continue. Everything around him was pitch black and no one knew what might lurk inside. Perhaps venomous snakes, perhaps traps. Or perhaps the inheritance of Flower Wine Monk. Fang Yuan gritted his teeth and continued forward. After dozens of steps, he suddenly saw a faint red glow. The light grew brighter until he squeezed through the crack, and the space suddenly opened before him. A hidden cave about 80 square meters wide appeared. The entire cavern was filled with dim red light whose source was unknown. Dry vines crawled across the walls and withered flowers hung among them. Fang Yuan examined them carefully and suddenly realized they were wine pouch flower goo and Brahma rice grass goo. Two types of plant goo worms that, if supplied with primeval essence, would produce wine and food. His gaze moved to the corner of the cave, where a skeleton lay tangled in dry vines. Fang Yuan walked over, caught the drunken liquor worm, then brushed aside the vines. A skeleton appeared and a faint smile rose on his lips. He murmured that he had finally found Flower Wine Monk. But at that exact moment, a cold voice suddenly echoed behind him, telling him to try moving and see what happened. Instantly, the hairs on the back of Fang Yuan's neck stood on end and his scalp tingled. Someone was here, he was being watched. Countless possibilities flashed through his mind. It could be someone from the clan. Someone who had noticed his movements these past few days. Or perhaps that Gu master named Jiang Ye he had encountered in the inn. The killing intent within that voice was unmistakable. If the other party truly wished to kill him. With Fang Yuan's current strength, he had almost no chance of resisting, because he was only a rank 1 initial stage Gu master, and did not even possess a vital Gu yet. His combat strength was practically non-existent. He roared silently in his heart that he was still far too weak. The voice behind him sounded again, saying that he had already been poisoned by their Gu, and that without an antidote Gu, 7 days later, he would turn into a puddle of blood. Fang Yuan clenched his teeth, but his face remained calm. In a low voice, he said that if they wanted the liquor worm, he could give it to them. He slowly stood up, his movements extremely slow. But just then another voice suddenly rang out, this one filled with terror, begging for life and calling out to Lord Flower Wine. Fang Yuan froze and turned around. Before his eyes, the stone wall suddenly displayed a strange image, like a memory being replayed. Within that image, a Gu master stood upon a mountain peak, while at his feet, another man knelt on the ground begging for mercy. Around them, the land was shattered, clearly showing that a fierce battle had just taken place. In the distance, a group of elders stood watching with horror on their faces. The man standing above was Flower Wine Monk, bald-headed with loose robes fluttering and an aura both violent and domineering. He threw back his head and laughed loudly, mocking the Gu Yue clan's genius. The man kneeling on the ground was the fourth-generation clan leader of the Gu Yue clan. The genius praised by the entire clan. But now he trembled and begged for mercy. Flower Wine Monk sneered and reminded him that he had come to the clan with sincere intent to trade, offering primeval stones to buy moon orchid flowers at a fair price. Yet they had tried to poison him during the banquet. He laughed disdainfully and asked if they truly believed he would fall for such poison. The fourth clan leader trembled and crawled forward, hugging Flower Wine Monk's leg and begging to be spared. He promised that his clan possessed a primeval spring mine and vast fields of moon orchid flowers, and that he was willing to become a slave as long as his life was spared. Hearing this, Flower Wine Monk thought for a moment and agreed on one condition. Every week the clan leader would provide 30 cattas of moon orchid flowers and 3,000 primeval stones. In return, he would periodically come to collect them and provide the antidote. The fourth clan leader immediately kowtowed until blood streamed down his forehead, thanking him repeatedly. Flower Wine Monk sneered at the disgusting coward, but at that moment his expression suddenly changed. He clutched his chest and staggered backward, demanding to know what had been done to him. The fourth clan leader wiped the blood from his face and revealed a sinister smile. He explained that this was the Moon Shadow Gu, a rank 4 Gu worm capable of sealing the primeval essence within the aperture. After the earlier battle, Flower Wine Monk's Gu worms had already been mostly exhausted, and he could not resist it. The clan leader laughed coldly and declared that now the demon should become his slave instead. Flower Wine Monk roared in fury and lunged forward. His fist struck directly at the clan leader's chest. With a thunderous impact, the fourth clan leader was sent flying, crashing to the ground as blood poured from his mouth and his organs shattered. Within seconds he died. The surrounding elders immediately shouted for the demon to be killed and for the clan leader to be avenged. Another battle erupted. Even with his primeval essence suppressed, Flower Wine Monk was still terrifyingly strong. In a short time, the elders were all defeated, some dead and some severely injured, collapsing on the ground. Flower Wine Monk prepared to kill them all, but suddenly he clutched his stomach as the poison began taking effect. He glared at the elders and swore that next time he would return and kill every one of them before turning and disappearing into the mountains. From that moment on, no one ever saw Flower Wine Monk again. Inside the hidden cave, Fang Yuan finally understood the truth. Reality was completely different from the story the clan had told for 300 years. The words about poison and death repeated again and again on the stone wall. It was not a real person but a recorded image. Fang Yuan watched silently, and only after the scene replayed 3 times did he sigh softly. Before his death, Flower Wine Monk had used the recording reflection Gu, a Gu worm capable of preserving images and sound and replaying them forever. Within this cave, the dim red light and the sound of the waterfall served as nourishment for that Gu. Thus, for 300 years, that memory had remained. The truth of history had been recorded perfectly on the stone wall, and that truth was completely different from the clan's legend. 300 years ago, the fourth clan leader was not a hero, but the one who had attempted to poison Flower Wine Monk first. When the attempt failed, he tried to ambush him, and in the end both sides died. The surviving elders twisted history, turning a coward into a hero and turning lies into legend. But the false story still contained a fatal flaw. If Flower Wine Monk had died on the spot, then why was there another skeleton here? At that moment, Fang Yuan finally understood. In his previous life, the Gu master who discovered this cave must also have seen this recording, and he was afraid. If he concealed the inheritance and one day the clan discovered the truth, he would become the person who knew the clan's darkest secret. There would be only one outcome: silence and death. So he chose to report it, not only avoiding suspicion but also receiving great rewards. It was a wise decision, but that was his choice, not Fang Yuan's. Fang Yuan laughed coldly. After so much effort to find this inheritance, why should he share it with others? Without taking risks, how could one gain benefits? He turned away, ignoring the image still replaying on the wall, and pulled apart the dry vines. The skeleton of Flower Wine Monk shattered instantly and bones scattered everywhere. Fang Yuan did not care. He began searching the inheritance and soon found a small pouch. Inside were 15 primeval stones. Fang Yuan frowned and muttered that Flower Wine Monk had been a poor ghost, but after thinking for a moment he understood. After the fierce battle and the poisoning, Flower Wine Monk must have used many primeval stones to heal himself. To still have 15 left was already fortunate. Aside from that, he found several dead Gu worms, most of them plant-type Gu. But after 300 years, all had withered away because Gu worms also required nourishment, and this cave had no sunlight or energy. Everything had died. After searching carefully, Fang Yuan realized the true inheritance was almost gone. Flower Wine Monk had survived here using wine pouch flower Gu and Brahma rice grass Gu to produce wine and food. But in the end, he still died from the moon shadow Gu. 300 years passed and everything decayed. Only two things remained: the liquor worm and the recording reflection Gu. The liquor worm had survived by drinking the wine produced by the wine pouch flower. But when the wine source gradually ran dry, it was forced to leave the cave in search of food. At that exact moment, it was attracted by Fang Yuan's green bamboo wine. Everything seemed like fate. Fang Yuan thought quietly that no wonder in his previous life, the Gu master who discovered this cave had reported it to the clan. Because the real benefits were not very great. For a rank 3 Gu master, a liquor worm was not worth the risk, but for Fang Yuan right now it was a priceless treasure. He looked at the stone wall again, and another thought flashed through his eyes. The most valuable thing here was not the inheritance, but the recorded image on the wall. Because it was proof of history and proof that the fourth clan leader of the Gu Yue clan was nothing but a despicable coward. If this recording were sold to the other two mountain clans of Qing Mao Mountain, its value would be far greater than the clan's reward. As for loyalty to the clan, Fang Yuan only sneered. In this world, one should never rely on anyone else. Everything must depend on oneself. After confirming the cave had been thoroughly searched, Fang Yuan left. He squeezed back through the rock crevice, stepped out from behind the waterfall, and glanced once more at the giant rock. In his memories from his previous life, the news had said the inheritance was underground, but here it was clearly inside a cliff. Obviously, after the clan discovered the truth, they deliberately spread false information to hide it. Fang Yuan looked at the rock one final time, then turned and left. Deep in the night, a young figure ran swiftly through the forest. On him now were 17 primeval stones and 1 liquor worm. Next, there was only one thing he needed to do: refine his vital Gu. Only then would his path of cultivation truly begin. Fang Yuan began to calculate, with his grade C aptitude. The primeval C within his aperture could contain at most 44% primeval essence. And when refining a Gu worm, his primeval essence would constantly be repelled by the Gu, causing the consumption rate to be even faster than the rate of natural recovery. Therefore, if he wanted to refine a Gu worm, he had to rely on external assistance, and that external force was primeval stones. Fang Yuan quickly calculated that refining the Moonlight Gu would require at least 5 primeval stones, and at most 8. But refining the liquor worm would be far more difficult. At the very least, it would require 11 stones, and in the worst case 16. Meanwhile, his current total wealth was only 17 stones. In other words, after refining the liquor worm, he might be left with only 1 primeval stone. Late at night, moonlight shone over Gu Yue Mountain village. Rows of bamboo buildings stood close together as a gentle night wind blew. Fang Yuan returned to the inn. The door was closed, so he knocked. After a while, the waiter opened it. At first, he grumbled lazily, but when he saw Fang Yuan, his attitude immediately changed. "Young master," Yu returned. A flattering smile instantly appeared on his face as he bowed deeply with extreme respect. This was the status of a Gu master. Fang Yuan simply nodded and said, "Prepare hot water, I want to wash." The waiter hurriedly agreed. Watching Fang Yuan's back, the waiter's eyes filled with envy. He muttered quietly that if only he also had cultivation aptitude, life would be wonderful. Those words reached Fang Yuan's ears, but he only smiled faintly. Outsiders saw only the glory of Gu masters, yet they did not see the hardship behind it. Gu master cultivation required primeval stones. Combat also required primeval stones. Refining Gu required even more primeval stones. Without money, cultivation was simply impossible. In fact, many Gu masters looked impressive on the surface, but were extremely poor in reality. Just like Gu master Jiang Ye at the inn earlier that day. He had become angry at the hunters simply because they dared to spend 2 primeval stones on wine. Because even he himself could not bear to spend such money. Gu masters were stronger than mortals, but their expenses were far greater, especially for low-level Gu masters. Every single primeval stone had to be carefully calculated. Fang Yuan recalled his previous life and understood this even more clearly. The higher one's cultivation, the greater the demand for resources. Without backing, the path of cultivation was incredibly difficult. Soon Fang Yuan returned to his room. The waiter brought the hot water, and after washing, Fang Yuan sat cross-legged on the bed. His heart was still excited because he had obtained the liquor worm, a very special Gu worm capable of refining primeval essence. Fang Yuan took it out. The fat white worm was sleeping soundly. Under the lamp, its body emitted a faint jade-like glow. Its tiny eyes were like sesame seeds, and it looked extremely innocent. When held in the hand, it weighed only about half an egg, and its body emitted a faint fragrance of wine. Fang Yuan inhaled lightly. That wine fragrance entered his body and then entered his aperture. Within the primeval sea, a strand of new primeval essence was born. This strand of essence was purer and denser. It was the primeval essence of rank 1 middle stage, yet Fang Yuan's cultivation was only rank 1 initial stage. This meant that as long as he possessed the liquor worm, he could use higher grade primeval essence. The corner of Fang Yuan's mouth curled upward, but the next moment he suppressed the smile because he had not yet refined the liquor worm. Only by turning it into his vital Gu could he truly use its power. Fang Yuan immediately began. He mobilized his primeval essence and wrapped it around the liquor worm. Immediately the liquor worm awakened and began to struggle violently, resisting the refining process. Fang Yuan frowned. Its resistance was twice as strong as the moonlight Gu, but he continued. Bronze-colored primeval essence kept pouring out, surrounding the liquor worm. Time passed. The candle burned slowly and the flame weakened. Outside the window, the moon set and dawn arrived. When Fang Yuan opened his eyes, a layer of light green color had appeared on the liquor worm's body. That was the sign of the refining process, but the green color had not yet spread across its entire body. Fang Yuan's expression became serious. This liquor worm had an extremely strong will, even surpassing the limit of ordinary rank 1 Gu worms. After thinking for a moment, Fang Yuan understood the reason. This liquor worm had once been the vital Gu of Flower Wine Monk. Before his death, the will of that rank 5 demonic cultivator had remained inside it. Therefore, refining it was no different from competing wills with Flower Wine Monk. And the will of a rank 5 powerhouse was naturally unyielding as iron. Fang Yuan sighed. If a rank 2 or rank 3 Gu master were here and used their Gu worm's pressure to suppress the liquor worm, he could refine it much faster. But unfortunately, he had no backing. His parents were dead, his uncle and aunt were plotting against him, and the clan did not value someone with grade C aptitude. More importantly, the existence of the liquor worm must not be exposed. If discovered, people would easily connect it to Flower Wine Monk, and then he would face great trouble. Fang Yuan calculated that refining this liquor worm would require at least 30 primeval stones, yet right now he only had 17. But no matter how difficult it was, he was determined to refine it. because a vital Gu would determine the path of cultivation. And under his current circumstances, the liquor worm was the best choice. Just then his stomach suddenly growled. After staying awake all night and consuming primeval essence, he was hungry. Fang Yuan stood up, went downstairs, and ordered breakfast. But just as he began eating, someone appeared. It was his younger brother, Gu Yue Fangzhang. He looked at Fang Yuan with accusation in his voice, and asked why he was staying at the inn and why he had not come home the previous night. Faced with his brother's question, Fang Yuan did not answer. He simply continued eating breakfast as if he had heard nothing. This made Fang Zheng increasingly annoyed. He already had a fiery temper, and seeing his brother treat him like air, he could no longer endure it. He shouted loudly, asking what Fang Yuan had done to Chen Kui, because since leaving Fang Yuan's room she had been crying. Fang Yuan merely glanced at him with indifferent eyes and continued eating. That attitude made Fang Zheng explode. He slammed the table and accused Fang Yuan of mistreating a girl who had cared for him for years simply because his aptitude was grade C. Before he could finish speaking, Fang Yuan suddenly stood up. His hand moved like lightning, smack, a loud slap echoed. Fang Zheng staggered back 2 steps, covering his cheek with shock in his eyes. Since childhood, Fang Yuan had never hit him, but today he had been slapped. Fang Yuan looked at him coldly and asked what kind of tone he was using to speak to his elder brother. Just because of a maid, he dared question him. Fang Zheng grew even angrier and shouted that Fang Yuan was jealous of his greater aptitude. Smack. Another slap landed even harder. Fang Zheng was completely stunned. Fang Yuan looked at him with icy eyes and began speaking. Since childhood, how had he treated him? When their parents died and they lived in hardship, the only new clothes they had each new year had always been given to Fang Zheng. Fang Zheng liked sweet porridge, and Fang Yuan had asked the kitchen to cook it for him every day. When others bullied Fang Zheng, Fang Yuan was the one who demanded justice. Every sentence was like a hammer striking Fang Zheng's heart. His face turned red and he could not speak because all of it was true. Fang Yuan sneered and asked if after all that, Fang Zheng had come to question him because of a maid. Fang Zheng lowered his head, unable to reply. But then Fang Yuan suddenly said something that shocked him. From that day onward, they were no longer brothers. Fang Zheng panicked and called out to him, but Fang Yuan continued calmly. He asked if Fang Zheng liked Chen Kui. He had not touched her, she was still a virgin, and if Fang Zheng wanted her, he could buy her for 6 primeval stones. Fang Zheng froze as his feelings were exposed. His face flushed red, yet in his heart he felt relieved because the thing he feared most had not happened. After hesitating, he agreed, but admitted that he did not have 6 stones. He took out his pouch, which contained 5.5 stones. 1 stone had already been half used. Fang Yuan took them without another word and told him to leave. Fang Zheng wanted to say more, but Fang Yuan coldly told him to get out before he changed his mind. Finally, Fang Zheng turned and left. As he stepped out of the inn, he suddenly felt an emptiness in his heart, as if he had lost something important. But soon he thought of Chen Kui and warmth returned to his heart. He left without looking back. Inside the inn, Fang Yuan stood still for a long time before sitting down again. Sunlight shone on his face, cold and emotionless. He touched the pouch of primeval stones, 5.5 stones. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly into a bitter smile that quickly disappeared. Then he calmly asked the waiter to reheat the food. It was as if what had just happened meant nothing at all. Meanwhile, in his uncle and aunt's room, the matter had already been reported. After hearing it, his uncle frowned and then sneered. He immediately understood that Fang Yuan needed primeval stones to refine Gu, and that 6 stones were enough to help him through the early stage. This made his uncle extremely unhappy because his plan had been to obstruct Fang Yuan's cultivation. If Fang Yuan fell behind, he would not receive resources from the academy. And without resources, his cultivation would slow further, creating a vicious cycle. Within a year, Fang Yuan would lack the strength to reclaim his inheritance. But now that plan had partly been ruined. His uncle sighed and said that Fang Yuan was too intelligent and too dangerous. Then he looked at his wife and added that fortunately they still had Fang Zheng, a great genius who, if guided properly, would become the best weapon against Fang Yuan. 2 days passed. Inside the inn room, Fang Yuan continued refining the liquor worm. 2 days and 2 nights he hardly slept and consumed 12 primeval stones, yet the refining progress had reached only 1/15. The liquor worm was too strong, and its will continued resisting stubbornly. But Fang Yuan was not anxious. As long as he refined the liquor worm, everything would be worth it. Suddenly the liquor worm curled up and white light burst forth. Fang Yuan immediately realized the liquor worm was resisting with all its might, and its powerful will charged directly into his aperture. But instead of panic, he felt delighted. If he won this time, the liquor worm's will would weaken greatly. He prepared to mobilize all his primeval essence to fight the liquor worm's will, but just then something unbelievable happened. Inside his aperture above the primeval sea, another Gu worm suddenly appeared. Boom. A terrifying aura exploded, like a collapsing galaxy or an ancient beast awakening. An overwhelming pressure filled the entire aperture. Even the liquor worm's will trembled under it. Fang Yuan's eyes widened in disbelief. It was the spring-autumn cicada. The Gu that had once caused the entire world to hunt Fang Yuan, the Gu capable of reversing time itself. It had awakened. Like an ancient monster sleeping deep within a cavern, it suddenly stirred awake and discovered that its territory was being invaded. A terrifying aura erupted. Compared to this presence, the will of the liquor worm was no more than an ant before an elephant. In an instant the aura swept through, and the liquor worm's will was completely obliterated. Even the primeval essence Fang Yuan had just mobilized was blown apart. The raging primeval sea collapsed instantly, and then the aura of spring-autumn cicada pressed down like an invisible mountain. In the blink of an eye, the turbulent primeval sea became perfectly still, like a mirror without the slightest ripple. Fang Yuan felt as though a gigantic mountain was pressing down upon him, and he could not mobilize even the slightest strand of primeval essence. Yet instead of panic, a powerful surge of joy rose in his heart. Spring-autumn cicada had returned with him. Before this, he had thought that after reversing time the Gu had disappeared, but unexpectedly it was still inside his aperture. Because reversing 500 years of time had consumed too much of its power. It had fallen into a deep sleep. And even Fang Yuan himself had not sensed its presence. But now, when his aperture was threatened, it had awakened. However, its condition was terrible. In Fang Yuan's memory, spring-autumn cicada had once been radiant. Its body shining brilliantly, and its wings green like fresh spring leaves full of vitality. But now it looked like a withered leaf of autumn. Its body was dull gray and its wings were dry and yellow with curled edges, like a dying leaf about to fall. It had weakened to the extreme. Yet this fact made Fang Yuan breathe a sigh of relief. If spring-autumn cicada had been in perfect condition, its aura alone would have shattered his aperture long ago. A rank 6 Gu worm inside the body of a mere rank 1 beginner was like a mountain inside a squirrel's body. Just touching it would crush the squirrel instantly. Fortunately, it was now far too weak, and only because of this could his aperture contain it. At that moment, Fang Yuan suddenly realized something. He had struggled desperately to obtain the liquor worm only because he wanted a vital Gu. But in truth, he had already possessed one from the very beginning. Spring-autumn cicada was already his vital Gu. It was the Gu worm he had refined for 500 years in his previous life, and that bond of refinement still existed. In fact, after passing through the river of time, the connection between him and spring-autumn cicada had become even deeper. A rank 1 Gu master possessing a rank 6 vital Gu would shatter every understanding of the world, yet it was the truth. Fang Yuan laughed in extreme excitement. Compared with spring-autumn cicada, the liquor worm was nothing but dirt beneath his feet. In this life, his true vital Gu would be spring-autumn cicada. The immense joy surged through him, but it was not enough to make Fang Yuan lose his composure. After only a few seconds, he calmed down and his mind began calculating again. Spring-autumn cicada was a rank 6 Gu worm capable of reversing time. But right now it had weakened to the extreme, and with even a little more damage it might die. Even so, it was still a rank 6 Gu, and its mere aura alone was terrifying. Fang Yuan smiled faintly and opened his eyes. In front of him, the liquor worm was still floating, but now it was trembling. Moments ago, it had resisted with all its might, but its will had been crushed directly by the aura of spring-autumn cicada. Now its will was not even 1% of what it had been before. Fang Yuan released a thread of spring-autumn cicada's aura. Instantly, the liquor worm froze. It did not dare move, completely suppressed like a mouse facing a cat. Fang Yuan activated his primeval essence. This time, his essence surged forward like a conquering army without resistance. Within just a few breaths, the green color spread across the liquor worm's entire body. The fat white worm turned bronze green, and its remaining will was gently crushed. In the blink of an eye, he had completely refined the liquor worm. Compared to the extremely difficult process 2 days earlier, this time it was as easy as drinking water. Immediately, a mysterious connection appeared. The liquor worm became a part of his body. If he wanted it to curl, it curled. If he wanted it to stretch, it stretched like one of his own fingers. Fang Yuan withdrew his primeval essence, and the liquor worm returned to its original white color. It jumped up and flew into the aperture. But when it saw spring-autumn cicada, it immediately avoided it and dived into the bronze primeval sea. On the surface of the sea of primeval essence, it stretched its body comfortably, occasionally wiggling its fat belly as if soaking in a hot bath. Seeing this, Fang Yuan suddenly understood something. His plan must change. He took out the moonlight goo and released another thread of spring-autumn cicada's aura. Instantly, the will of the moonlight goo surrendered. It did not dare resist and shrank inside its body in terror. Fang Yuan activated his primeval essence, and in an instant the moonlight goo was dyed bronze green. Its will was easily crushed, and within just a few minutes Fang Yuan completed the refinement. The moonlight goo returned to its original form, a curved shard of transparent pale blue crystal. Then it rose into the air, and instead of entering the aperture, it landed on Fang Yuan's forehead, transforming into a crescent-shaped blue mark. The entire process took less than 5 minutes, and he had not consumed a single primeval stone. Fang Yuan laughed softly. With spring-autumn cicada, it truly felt like having divine assistance. From now on, as long as he used its aura, he could easily suppress any rank 1 goo worm. Even though his aptitude was only grade C, he no longer needed to rely heavily on primeval stones. The difference between before and now was like stepping from hell into heaven. At that moment outside the window, the bright moon hung high in the sky, and moonlight illuminated Fang Yuan's face. His eyes shone as he thought that at first he believed it would be impossible to take first place in the goo refinement test. But now the situation had changed. Time waited for no one. Fang Yuan immediately stood up, hid the liquor worm to avoid inspection from the academy, and left the inn, walking straight toward the clan academy. At midnight, the academy elder was sleeping when he suddenly heard knocking at the door. A subordinate reported that a student had successfully refined the moonlight goo. The elder was slightly surprised but soon smiled, assuming it must be Fang Zhang. In his eyes, the one who would take first place could not possibly be anyone else. It could only be the grade A genius. Soon the elder walked into the hall, but when he saw the person standing there, he was slightly surprised. Nevertheless, he burst into laughter and patted the young man on the shoulder, praising Fang Zhang for living up to expectations, and saying that those with grade B or grade C aptitude could never surpass him. But at that moment the young man stepped back slightly, avoiding the elder's hand, and said calmly that the elder had mistaken him. He was not Fang Zhang, he was Gu Yue Fang Yuan. The academy elder froze instantly. He stared at the crescent mark on Fang Yuan's forehead. After several seconds, he asked in disbelief whether Fang Yuan had refined the moonlight goo. Fang Yuan replied calmly that he had. The elder asked again if that meant he was the first place this year. Fang Yuan thought for a moment, then smiled faintly and said that if no one had been faster than him, then he supposed so. The academy elder stood there speechless. Dawn had not yet fully broken. In the east, the sky was only beginning to glow faintly red, while darkness still lingered across the heavens. The early morning air in the mountain forest was damp and chilly, yet Gu Yue Fang Zhang felt no cold at all. Inside his heart, a fire was burning. Over the past few days, he had trained bitterly and spent 2 primeval stones. The previous night, he had not even slept, and at last he had successfully refined the moonlight goo. He was absolutely certain that no one could possibly be faster than him. After all, he possessed greater aptitude, a true genius. Father, mother, I won't disappoint you. Thinking of the satisfied expressions of his uncle and aunt, his heart filled with pride and his steps quickened. Those who once looked down on him, even his elder brother, would have to look at him differently from this day forward. He arrived at the entrance of the academy, but the moment he reached the gate, the two guards looked at him with puzzled expressions. One of them asked why Gu Yue Fang Yuan had come back again. Fang Zheng froze. His brother had already been there. A trace of doubt flashed through his mind, but he did not think much of it. He cupped his hands proudly and said that he was not Fang Yuan but Gu Yue Fang Zheng, and that he had already refined his vital Gu and had come to receive the first place reward. The two guards exchanged looks. One of them gave a bitter smile and told him he was late. The previous night, his brother Fang Yuan had already claimed the reward. Fang Zheng felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His eyes widened in disbelief. Fang Yuan had taken first place. This was completely beyond his imagination. A man with grade C aptitude, someone who drank all day, slept in class, never returned home at night, and had just slapped him twice. That man had taken first place. In Fang Zheng's mind, the strongest competitors had always been only two people, Mo Bei and Kai Cheng. Both had grade B aptitude and powerful families backing them. If either of them had won, he could have accepted it. But the winner was Fang Yuan, his own brother, someone he had always looked down upon. Inside Fang Zheng's heart, a scream erupted. He had worked so hard while Fang Yuan did nothing but drink, and yet Fang Yuan had won. Where was the justice in that? The sun slowly rose and birds sang in the forest. Qing Mao Mountain was filled with life, yet Fang Zheng stood silently at the academy gate with his head lowered, staring at his lonely shadow. Inside his heart, emotions churned chaotically: confusion, anger, unwillingness, and fear, all tangled together. Not long after the results were posted on the notice board, only two names appeared: first place Fang Yuan, second place Fang Zheng. The news quickly spread throughout the mountain village. All the youths of the academy were shocked. Many could accept Fang Zheng losing to Mo Bei or Kai Cheng, but losing to Fang Yuan seemed absurd. After all, Fang Yuan only had grade C aptitude. The news spread further until even the major clan branches heard of it. At the Mo clan, Elder Mo Chen merely snorted coldly when he heard the report. In his opinion, Fang Yuan had simply been lucky, perhaps choosing a Gu worm with weaker resistance that allowed him to refine it faster. At the Kai clan, Elder Kai Lion comforted his grandson Kai Cheng and told him not to lose heart. Refining Gu was not determined solely by aptitude. Sometimes the Gu worm itself also played a role. In his eyes, Fang Yuan had only won through fortune, and someone with grade C aptitude would never go far. Kai Cheng's real opponents were Fang Zheng and Mo Bei. He even promised to personally assist Kai Cheng with the aura of a rank 3 Gu worm when refining Gu next time. Meanwhile, the person who had shaken the entire village, Fang Yuan himself, remained completely calm. In his heart, he understood clearly that this first place was merely the first step in a far greater plan. A path leading to the peak of the Gu Master World. 10 days passed since Fang Yuan took first place. Spring on Qing Mao Mountain grew even more vibrant. The sky was deep blue, white clouds drifted lazily. And flocks of colorful parrots flew across the mountains with sharp cries echoing through the valleys. The spring wind swept across the grasslands, while wildflowers bloomed everywhere and butterflies and bees fluttered through the air. Life flourished in every corner. But inside the academy training field, the atmosphere was completely different. 57 15-year-old youths stood in a semicircle, all staring attentively toward the center. There stood the academy elder. Today they would learn how to use the Moonlight Gu, the symbolic Gu worm of the Gu Yue clan. The elder slowly raised his hand and opened his palm. He told them to watch carefully, explaining that he would demonstrate how the Moonlight Gu was used to attack. First, he used his thoughts to control the Gu worm. The crescent-shaped mark on his body slowly moved down into his palm. Then a thread of silver primeval essence flowed from his body into the Gu worm. This was white silver primeval essence, something only rank 3 Gu masters could condense. Immediately the crescent mark in his palm began to glow with faint blue light, clear as water. The youths watching could not help gasping. The elder smiled and suddenly swung his hand. A blue crescent blade shot out like a sliver of moonlight tearing through the air. In an instant, it struck a straw dummy 10 meters away. The dummy's neck was cut clean through and its head dropped to the ground. The moonblade continued flying several meters further before slowly dissipating. The training field fell silent for several seconds before amazement erupted everywhere. Some stared at the dummy, others stared at the elder's hand, and some even touched their own necks as if imagining the strike landing on them. The power shocked them deeply. Only one person remained completely calm, Fang Yuan. In his eyes, this demonstration was nothing more than child's play. In his previous life, he had cultivated to rank 6 and founded the Blood-Winged Demon sect. His name had once shaken Central Continent. A mere rank 3 Gu master naturally could not impress him. Soon the academy elder gave the order. Those who had already refined the Moonlight Gu were to step forward. 35 youths stepped out and stood before straw dummies. Training began. One after another, the youths raised their hands and bronze-green primeval essence poured into their Gu worms. Faint blue lights flickered continuously. But reality proved far more difficult than they imagined. Some moonblades dissipated the moment they were released. Some flew off in completely wrong directions. Some even collided with each other midair. Only a few actually struck the straw dummies, and most of those hits were simply luck. The academy elder observed calmly. He had seen this scene every year and was not surprised. Afterward, he began offering individual guidance, but most of his attention focused on talented students such as Fang Zheng, Mo Bei, and Kai Cheng. As for Fang Yuan, he only gave a few casual pointers. In the elder's eyes, someone with grade C aptitude was not worth investing resources in. Fang Yuan did not care in the slightest. He pretended to practice and waved his hand several times, but in truth he did not release a single moonblade. He was merely observing and waiting for the right moment. After a while, the training ground became chaotic. Moonblades flew everywhere and no one paid attention to him anymore. Only then did Fang Yuan quietly move his thoughts and flick his hand. A sharp moonblade shot out instantly, piercing through the chaotic battlefield along a perfectly straight line. It struck the neck of a straw dummy and cut deep into the straw. The surrounding students immediately cried out, wondering who had fired such a precise attack. Even the academy elder noticed and asked a nearby student if it had been him. The boy was stunned, but under the gaze of everyone he nodded. Instantly, the surrounding students looked at him with admiration, and the elder praised him warmly. Meanwhile, Fang Yuan had already blended quietly back into the crowd. No one knew the moonblade had actually been fired by him. In his eyes, those praises meant nothing at all. The academy elder then announced that 3 days later there would be a test, and the student with the best performance would receive 10 primeval stones as a reward. Immediately, all the students became excited. But their excitement did not last long. Soon they realized a problem. Each time a moonblade was fired, it consumed 10% of their primeval essence. Students with lower aptitude could only fire 2 or 3 times before they had to stop. Complaints quickly began spreading among them. Some said their primeval essence had already run out and they could not continue practicing. The academy elder watched the scene and sighed inwardly. This was the cruelty of the Gu master path. Those with high aptitude possessed more primeval essence and recovered faster, allowing them to practice more. Those with low aptitude could only rely on primeval stones if they wished to keep up. And if someone had neither aptitude nor resources, the road of cultivation was almost hopeless. The elder looked toward the talented youths and silently made a decision. The clan's resources would naturally be prioritized for the strong. Fang Yuan still stood quietly among the crowd, his gaze calm. No one knew that this youth whom everyone despised had already stepped onto an entirely different path, a path leading to the peak of the Gu Master. The sun slowly set behind the mountains and the red glow of dusk spread across the horizon. The distant mountain ranges were dyed dark as another day of lessons at the Gu Yue Academy came to an end. The youths gradually left the training field, gathering in lively groups and chatting excitedly. Some talked about how impressive the moonblade attacks looked, while others complained about their poor aptitude. Some planned to go eat together or drink wine, while others discussed buying straw dummies so they could practice more at home. Amid the lively crowd, one person walked away alone. Fang Yuan headed straight toward the Gu storage chamber of the academy, where many rank 1 Gu worms were kept. His own Moonlight Gu had been chosen from there. Beside the chamber was a small shop. Fang Yuan walked inside. 7 students were already there, bargaining with the shopkeeper to buy straw dummies for training. The person running the shop was a young Gu master a little over 20 years old named Gu Yue. When he saw Fang Yuan, he smiled warmly and said he had saved a straw dummy set for him. It cost 3 primeval stones and only 7 sets remained. Gu Yue spoke casually, but Fang Yuan sneered inwardly. These straw dummies were simply made using the grass man Gu. Their actual cost was only about 1.5 primeval stones, yet they were sold for 3. It was extremely profitable. When the other students heard that only 7 sets remained, they panicked and rushed to buy them without bargaining. In moments, the straw dummies were sold out and the youths left happily. Gu Yue then leaned closer to Fang Yuan and said quietly that he had secretly hidden one final set and asked if Fang Yuan wanted it. Fang Yuan shook his head. He placed 1 primeval stone on the counter and said he wanted moon orchid petals instead. Gu Yue looked slightly surprised, but still handed him a paper package containing 10 petals. After checking them, Fang Yuan left the shop. Gu worms not only needed to be refined and used, they also had to be fed. Refining Gu, using Gu, and feeding Gu were the 3 indispensable aspects of a Gu master's life. Every Gu worm had its own unique food. Some ate soil, some absorbed starlight, some drank tears, and some even fed on clouds and mist. The 3 Gu worms Fang Yuan possessed were the same. Moonlight Gu ate moon orchid petals, 2 meals a day with 2 petals each time. The liquor worm drank wine, and a jar of green bamboo wine could sustain it for 4 days. As for the spring-autumn cicada, its food was stranger than all the rest. It drank time itself, the river of time that flowed invisibly around every living being. 3 days later, another lesson was held in the academy training field, but this time it was not about Gu worms but about basic martial arts. In the center of the field stood a muscular instructor with bronze skin and a body covered in scars from countless battles. He demonstrated combat techniques before a wooden training dummy, while explaining how to dodge punches and counterattack vulnerable areas like the stomach or groin. The wooden dummy swung a punch, and he instantly lowered his body to evade it before unleashing a barrage of strikes that knocked the dummy down within seconds. Unfortunately, most students did not seem interested. In their minds, they were thinking only about the upcoming Moonblade examination. Some whispered about how many Moonblades they could fire, while others admitted they had bought extra straw dummies to practice. Their murmuring grew louder until the instructor suddenly shouted for silence. His voice thundered across the field, and the students immediately fell quiet. He told them that they thought martial arts were unimportant. But in the early stages of being a Gu master, martial arts were even more important than Gu worms. He demonstrated again, throwing a massive wooden dummy to the ground and smashing its head apart with rapid punches. He explained that in close combat one should not fear larger opponents, because controlling the center of gravity could defeat them. Every detail he shared was knowledge earned through blood and life-or-death battles. But most students failed to understand its value. In their eyes, the flashy Moonblade attacks were far more attractive. Only one person listened carefully, Fang Yuan. To him, these lessons were not new knowledge but simple review. In his previous life, his combat experience far surpassed that of the instructor. Soon the martial arts class ended, and after a short break the academy elder returned. All the youths immediately became excited because the Moonblade examination had begun. The elder pointed toward a row of straw dummies and announced the rules. 5 people per group, 3 attacks each. The first group stepped forward, and Moonblades flew chaotically through the air. After 3 rounds, only 9 hits landed. The elder shook his head in dissatisfaction. Some students could only fire 2 attacks and were scolded. One girl nearly burst into tears because she had refused to spend primeval stones on training, and now her Moonblade control was terrible. This was the cruel reality of the Gu Master world. If you wanted to become strong, you had to burn money. Many students had already given up hope of winning first place, so they refused to waste too many primeval stones practicing. The elder's brows furrowed deeper as he watched. Fang Yuan shook his head slightly. Primeval stones were meant to be used. If someone only hoarded them, they would never become a true Gu master. Soon a student who drew everyone's attention stepped forward. Gu Yue. Tall and muscular, he raised his hand and swung 3 times. 3 moonblades shot out and all struck the target. The surrounding students praised him, and the elder nodded approvingly. Next came Gu Yue Cheng, short and pockmarked but extremely focused. He also fired 3 moonblades that struck the dummy's chest. His result matched Mo Bei's exactly. The elder nodded in satisfaction. Kai Cheng stepped down and shot Mo Bei a provocative glance, but Mo Bei only snorted and shifted his gaze toward someone else. Fang Zhang. In Mo Bei's mind, the real opponents were only 2 people, Kai Cheng and Fang Zhang. One had strong family backing, the other possessed great aptitude. Everyone else was not worth worrying about. Soon the final group stepped forward. At last Fang Zhang walked onto the field, all eyes were fixed on him.